two goals of war. One is releasing all the hostages, and the other is destroying Hamas as a governmental and military entity. And to destroy Hamas, we must go into Rafah, take over this whole area, reach the leadership of Hamas, reach all the hostages, because there is no scenario where Hamas is going to release all of them. So it will need to be done militarily. But we understand that trying to release hostages in a military operation, it's complicated, it's dangerous. So if we have a chance to temporary agreement of ceasefire, 40 days, and release a big part of the hostages who are alive, because we know that only maybe half of the hostages are alive, then Israel is willing to have a ceasefire for months or a bit more, and then renew the attack, the ground incursion, because without that, Israel is going to lose the war. There is no scenario where Israel can afford losing a war against Hamas. Generally speaking, when you do a very large ground incursion, there is two phases. One is conquering the area, taking over the area, destroying the main military capabilities, the brigade, the battalions, command and control, and so on. So Israel has reached that in the northern part of Gaza, in most of the central part, in Khan Yunis in the south, and basically Rafah is the last stronghold. Having said that, even in areas where the IDF is controlling, the first part doesn't mean complete destruction of all terror infrastructure. There are still many terrorists spread around. There is a vast terror infrastructure. They are not organized now as battalions or companies or brigades, but we see terrorists regrouping in different places. We saw that, for example, in El Shifa hospital, where 1,000 terrorists all went into Shifa hospital thinking that this will be a safe haven. And then in 15 minutes, the IDF crossed all over all the northern part of Gaza, surrounded the hospital and managed to kill many of them and apprehend many of them. So this is what the IDF means when it says we have freedom of operation. And now there are these four remaining battalions in Rafah. I would say that most of the capabilities of Hamas are in Rafah. They retreated constantly from other areas into Rafah, and they are fortified Rafah to such an extent that going now into a ground incursion will look much like the first days of the war, the first ground incursion, meaning you need massive air force, artillery, tanks, in order to be able to really maneuver and go inside. Without that, there will be many soldiers on our side killed. There is no option to do a minimal operation or raids or different ideas that I heard in the last few weeks. It's not consistent with the reality on the ground of how fortified Rafah is at the moment. So Israel is planning to move the Palestinian citizens from Rafah through humanitarian corridors. I think this should be seen around the world, that Israel is doing really everything it can to get as many citizens out. There might be a reality where Hamas will try to stop these citizens in order to use them as human shields. We have seen that also in the northern part of Gaza. But we have also seen that the moment the fight starts, many of the citizens are more afraid of the fighting than Hamas, and then they flee anyway. And if Hamas tries to block citizens from getting out of the war zone, this should be exposed. Israel is going to do everything we can in order to really minimize collateral damage and evacuate as many citizens as possible from Rafah to other areas.
How confident are you that in an operation in Rafah, the IDF would be able to get to the head of the snake, Yahya Sinwar, and the Hamas leadership?
Well, providing that they don't escape to the Sinai Peninsula, to the Egyptian side, I would say that's if it's certain. I mean, this is physics. They retreated to Rafah. They took the hostages to Rafah. Everything is in Rafah now. They are with their back to the wall. Literally, the Egyptians built a wall on the border. So they have nowhere to go. So eventually, it's not such a big town. Eventually, we'll reach the leadership of Hamas if they don't manage to escape through tunnels into the Egyptian side.
How long will a operation in Rafah take, do you think, for the IDF to declare it a success?
We have to be very thorough because the leadership is probably underground in tunnels. Probably also many of the hostages are held underground. And we've seen in Khan Yunis. In Khan Yunis, it was a very, very unique battle. We had a division that operated with 7 brigades. I don't recall a single battle in the history of the state of Israel where 7 brigades attacked simultaneously one place. And it took a very long time. It took almost 3 months. And the reason was that we had to fight also inside the tunnels. The division developed techniques how to overcome the improvised explosive devices, the booby traps, the blast doors, and many terrorists that are inside the tunnels, and managed to clear them. And the division managed to clear more than 30 kilometers of tunnels. So we have gained the experience, we know how to do it, but it takes time.
A slightly different threat on the border with Lebanon and claims of responsibility by Hezbollah today that they were behind a rocket barrage on Kiryat Shimona. What's your take on that threat and when Israel has to deal with it in a arguably more meaningful way?
We have about 80,000 Israeli citizens displaced. They have left their homes in the north. They are under a Hezbollah attack, and they are currently in hotels all over Israel since the beginning of the war. In 7 months, people are not at home, and they don't see any new future where they can go back. Now, it's obvious that the citizens cannot go safely back home without pulling Hezbollah out of South Lebanon, according to Resolution 1701. This can happen in 2 ways, diplomatically, if there is enough international pressure and an American resolution to pose a military threat on Iran and Hezbollah. Without that, we'll probably see Israel finishing the main missions in Gaza, sending the troops north, and then saying clearly, or retreat or war. And we might find ourselves in a very big war with Hezbollah in the north. That might be even a bigger war than what we experienced in Gaza. Hezbollah is a much, much stronger player than Hamas. I think it needs to be understood. Iran is a global threat. It's not just a regional threat, and it's not just a threat on Israel. Iran, as a regime, they have global aspirations. They want to control all the main strains in the globe. They are undermining Morocco, trying to control Gibraltar. They are operating in Bab el-Mandab and in Hormuz. They want nuclear weapons so they can terrorize Europe and the US. So this needs to be approached globally. And it's not just Israel's problem. Now, Israel, of course, I think will do whatever is needed to prevent Iran from becoming nuclear. But really, the right path is a coalition, is normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia, is the US leading a coalition and be willing to pose a credible military threat on Iran. What we saw in the Iranian attack is that we can cope with this. They shot everything they have. Israel managed to deal with this very well, and also in coordination with other countries. On the other hand, we saw that Israel is able to hit them wherever Israel wants. So I think this is emboldening the Israeli army and the government to understand we can deal with them. And if there is a need to attack these nuclear sites, Israel in the coming future probably would do that. But again, it's much better to really approach this huge threat as a coalition.